guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's video where I'm going to be first explaining the signs and symptoms of type 1 diabetes and then explaining my diagnosis story. So if you are newly diagnosed, stick around to the end because I will be not only sharing my story and kind of showing you what might be to come, but also I'm going to be sharing how I kind of came to grips with the situation and accepted my new reality and started living my life again. So I was diagnosed when I was 7 years old, so quite a long time ago now, and I feel like looking back on it, there were certain things that really helped me to move forward with my life. So yeah, I'll be discussing them at the end. But let's dive right in firstly with the signs and symptoms of type 1 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes is essentially your body cannot produce insulin anymore, and insulin is what allows glucose to get into the bloodstream. Now when you don't have insulin, this creates two problems. Firstly, because glucose is the body's main source of energy, if it's not getting into the bloodstream, it can't get around the body to provide energy. So that's one main problem. And the second problem is having glucose in the bloodstream is a high blood sugar level, and that is essentially what causes all of the complications if you don't look after your diabetes, and is very, very dangerous for the body. So you have two problems: that firstly you don't have energy, and secondly you have this high blood glucose that you need to fix, and this produces a range of symptoms. So in relation to having no energy and the glucose not getting around your body, the first symptom that is often discussed is that you are really tired. You can also start to lose weight really quickly because glucose isn't getting to your muscles and all of that kind of thing. This weight loss is often very unexpected. It happens even if you're not trying to do it and can be quite quick. And you can also experience blurred vision, basically really strong fatigue and any kind of symptom that's associated with an extreme tiredness. In relation to the high blood glucose, this also causes a variety of different symptoms that can show up. So firstly, you become extremely thirsty because your body wants to dilute the blood and make the blood glucose level as small as possible, so you end up drinking a lot. This leads to increased need to go to the toilet, especially in the middle of the night. This can happen if you're getting up a couple of times in the night or more. I think when I was diagnosed, I was getting up like 4 times in the night to pee. And this also has a side effect because the urine that you're getting rid of contains sugar, because your body's trying to get rid of the glucose from your blood in any way possible, and it shouldn't normally be coming out in your urine. Because it is, this creates a really strong environment for bacteria to grow and can lead to kind of thrush and those kind of genital rashes that are not tend to be known as a symptom of type 1 diabetes, but they are because of the glucose in the urine. You may also notice that cuts and wounds start to take a lot longer to heal. And again, this isn't really known as a symptom of type 1 diabetes, but can be a really common one. So we've had a slight change of scenery because someone decided to start banging around some pots and pans downstairs, so I've moved up a floor. But just to finish this section on the signs and symptoms of type 1 diabetes, if you have a child and you are worried that they are showing symptoms of diabetes, something that is really helpful is Diabetes UK have kind of championed the 4 T's. So thirsty, toilet, thinner, tired. If your child or you are displaying a mixture of these symptoms, if it's just one of these symptoms, then don't kind of panic yourself and jump to conclusions that it's diabetes. But if they're showing a selection of these symptoms, head to the GP and get a blood test, and it will go from there. With the diabetes diagnosis, the longer you leave it, the kind of worse it can affect you in the long run. So as soon as you see the symptoms, go and get yourself checked. With the signs and symptoms dealt with, I am going to dive into my diagnosis story. In this video, I'm only going to discuss kind of the diagnosis and the immediate months after that, so you can kind of know what might be in store for you if you are newly diagnosed and how the process kind of goes. If you would like to see more about my diabetes now and my journey from how I did have a period of quite bad control like 10 years ago, and how I got myself really on top of things again, then check out my type 1 diabetes journey video, which I will link here. And yeah, you can see kind of how my diabetes has evolved over the years with kind of the new medications and stuff that have come out. But yeah, for now I'm just going to jump into what happens after diagnosis. So I was 7 years old and I was showing the symptoms, kind of the 4 T's exactly. I was really tired, really thirsty, going to the toilet a lot. So I went to the doctor, had a blood test, and they said you need to go to hospital and take an overnight bag because you might be there for a while. So I went to the hospital with my mum. we ended up being there for 3 days, and they confirmed my diabetes diagnosis and then had us in to explain what was going to happen, teach my parents about the insulin doses and the medication and how to control everything. Obviously you do not learn everything in those 3 days. To be honest, even 15 years later you're still learning little bits as you go. But obviously they just want you to know enough to last the week or the next few days until you can get in with some specialists in a diabetes centre. So if you are thinking you are potentially facing a diabetes diagnosis, be prepared, have an overnight bag. So obviously at 7 years old I had no idea what diabetes was. All I could see was that my parents were really upset and I didn't know why. To be honest, from my mum's reaction I thought I was going to die, which obviously you're not if you have type 1 diabetes. It is completely controllable and manageable. But yeah, so I was just quite scared and I didn't really listen to anything any of the doctors were saying because like mum and dad were just going to take care of me. So for the first few weeks they just had me on a really strict diet while they work out your insulin ratios and how your body reacts. So at this point I was kind of eating minimal carbohydrates because carbohydrates are the things that will alter your blood sugar level just while they get you on track. So if you get put on a really strict diet at the beginning, please don't think this is going to be forever, because it definitely won't be. And eventually you will learn to count carbohydrates and adjust your insulin doses. And if you're at that stage now, then I do have a video all about my top tips for counting carbs for diabetes, which again will be linked here. So again, at the beginning they keep it extremely basic while you just get used to the ins and outs of diabetes. So now most people will have a basal insulin and a bolus insulin, and that just means you have one that keeps you steady and one that counteracts your food in a very basic terminology. So you still need insulin even if you eat nothing, and that is your basal insulin. And then when you eat, you have extra insulin, which is a different type of insulin which acts differently and acts quicker and is basically just a completely different medicine essentially. But at the very beginning they just had me on one type of insulin just to keep me steady, just while they work out where your body's at, because diabetes doesn't just happen like that. You do have a kind of downward slope because essentially it's your beta cells in your pancreas that die, and they don't all die at once. So while some of them are still alive and working, you won't need as much insulin, and they just have to work out what stage you're at before they can give you your medication. So the first couple of weeks are an extremely restricted lifestyle in terms of diet and what you can do and exercise. But like I said, don't worry, it does get better. You will have a normal life. To get to that stage of having more independence, you have to keep a really strict diary of your blood sugars, your insulin doses and your eating habits, or a food diary. So I kept this for a really long time, a few months. At this point, in the first few months after diagnosis, my parents were doing my blood sugars and my injections for me. So I was diagnosed at the very beginning of November. By December I had learned to do my own blood tests, and then my mum would come into school at lunchtime to do my lunchtime injection, and I could do my own blood test throughout the day. But then by January I was doing my own injections, and they teach you to do that by injecting into an orange, which was interesting. But please make sure you throw away the oranges that you have injected into, because you do not want to be eating an insulin orange. The first step of kind of getting back to normality was getting back to school. So my parents did have to go into the school and explain, because they hadn't actually had a child with diabetes there before. It was a very small little local primary school, and yeah, they had to just go and explain what diabetes is, what I'm allowed to eat, and explain about my injections and my blood tests. And I just had a designated area in the office where I kept all my supplies and my snacks in case I went low, and all my injections, all my needles and that kind of thing were just kept in the office for me, and I would just go at lunchtime when I needed and do what I needed to do. But my parents did need to sit down with the school and have an in-depth chat about what was going on. So eventually, as you get more and more used to living with diabetes, they put you on more and more kind of complicated but better medicines. This essentially means that you move away from a restricted diet and restricted capabilities. So at the beginning you're not really allowed to exercise because it can lower your blood sugar, and you move towards a way where you're living like a normal person, but it takes more maths and more calculations regarding your insulin and your medication. So essentially after a few months you can eat what you want, you just have to adjust for this with your insulin injections. And again, I have just done a video all about what type 1 diabetics can eat and how to adjust your insulin to different types of food, including carbohydrates, proteins and fats, and again that video will be linked here. Also can really quickly get back into doing sport, but you just have to learn how to adjust your insulin to the exercise that you are doing. And again, there are so many resources on the internet. I have a video on that, but your doctors and nurses should obviously also explain that to you as well. Things do basically become just a normal life like anyone else without diabetes, except you just have to inject. Be mindful of all of the different things that can affect your blood sugars, and there are a hell of a lot, I will tell you now. It is never a completely normal, stress-free life. There are always things that you have to think about, but you can do anything that anyone else can. You just have to plan a bit more. So I then also moved hospital maybe 2 to 3 years into my diagnosis, and this was actually a really great change for me, because at the hospital I went to, there was a separate diabetes clinic, and they did like holidays for kids with type 1 diabetes, which was really, really great. And I could meet kids with type 1 diabetes, and we were all looked after by the nurses. So it's like having a holiday away from your diabetes, but with other kids that understood your condition as well, because at school you can feel like maybe you're a bit weird or a bit different because you have type 1 diabetes, but you are not. There are so many of us, and we are all pretty normal people. But yeah, at my new hospital they also had a system where people that were newly diagnosed were buddied up with someone that had already been diagnosed for a while. Obviously it was an opt-in system, they didn't like force anything on you. So at this point I'd been diagnosed for maybe 3 years, and I was introduced to at that point a little girl who had just been diagnosed, and this was, I don't know, I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, and we are still like really, really close friends to this day. And we really helped each other out over the years, and it was someone else that you could understand all the struggles that you were going through, and you felt the safest of all going to their house for dinner because their parents knew exactly what you were doing. It just reminds me of another thing that did have to happen, was when mum wrote out a sheet of basically how to look after me with my diabetes to give to my friends' mums when I went over for dinner. Obviously it wasn't in depth of like all of the various different things you need to do, but just the basics that a parent or an adult should know if they're looking after a child with type 1 diabetes. It was only maybe 1 or 2 sides of A4, and my mum's handwriting was really, really large, so it could probably all be condensed to a side or half a side, just so that mum felt safe leaving me with these people, and I knew that the adult in charge would know what to do if something did happen to me that I needed assistance with. But yeah, meeting friends and other young kids and young adults with diabetes is such a great thing to do. The online community is super, super great as well. Obviously there are loads of great people here on YouTube, but also on Instagram. There are loads of people sharing their stories and their advice and their struggles with type 1 diabetes, which just makes you feel more of a sense of community and understand that it's not just you, and there are people that can help you and sympathise with you. So like I said, going to quickly explain the things that helped me move on with my life after my type 1 diabetes diagnosis. And to be honest, I've kind of already said them already. It was finding a community and friends and people that had diabetes or understood diabetes, so I didn't feel completely alone. It was educating myself around my condition and knowing what kind of things would be the most beneficial for me and what kind of things I didn't want to be involved with or I wasn't ready for. Looking at technology, looking at different insulins, all that kind of thing. Being as educated as I could really helped me move on, because I felt like I was in control of the condition rather than the condition being in control of me. And finally, just learning to take a step back every now and then. Sometimes you do just want to be a kid, and as long as you have your diabetes under really good control most of the time, the odd party where you eat something and you forget to inject, or you go low and you have to have more snacks than normal or anything like that, is completely fine. It's not going to harm you as long as normally you're under control. Sometimes it's okay to put the diabetes on the back burner and just take care of yourself and have fun and enjoy yourself. I am thinking of doing a video about how type 1 diabetes will affect your lifestyle and the things you can do and the things that benefit your diabetes and the things that are maybe a bit more tricky, but I don't know if that's something that you would be interested in. So if you do want to see that video, then please leave a comment down below and I'll make sure to make that, and yeah, just discuss kind of the difference between a life with and a life without type 1 diabetes and all the things that you might need to consider. But for now, that is it for this video. I hope you guys found it informative and reassuring, because yeah, just want to say it one more time, life will go pretty much back to normal and there is absolutely nothing you can't do with type 1 diabetes. It does not control you. You can 100% be in control of the condition and live a super happy and healthy life. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!